Flora, do you have any sort of tips or anything that we normally at the MS Trust would sort of say to people if they are struggling with fatigue as their sort of main barrier to travel? Are there any tips and tricks here?
I mean, it would mainly come down to planning, I think, as far as we'd recommend, because one of the core treatments for fatigue that we have is pacing. And if you don't know what's coming, then you won't be able to pace your energy levels effectively. Obviously, it's a very nice idea being able to plan everything, and then you get there and it's exactly as you expect, and that's never the case. So it's almost like you have to build in you have to kind of reduce what you would do to make sure you have that extra energy for when things do go wrong. So it's pretty complicated, just as fatigue management, can be complex. Having sort of ideas of building in kind of rests on the journey, depending on how you're traveling, like actually thinking, well, if I'm going to be doing this for 30 minutes, how can I make sure there's somewhere for me to just kind of sit down and kind of disconnect from things, having to navigate everything and kind of regain some energy there can be useful depending on how fatigue affects you.
I find that helps actually. My strategy is to build in lots of rests along the way. Make sure you stop for a cup of tea whenever you can. So journeys take a lot longer than they normally would, but you get through them. And also things like wearing sunglasses or headphones so that you're limiting the amount of stimulus that comes into you. You're sort of shutting out some of that light and sort of a bit of the noise, and it sort of helps you be a bit more centered and your brain's not getting so worn out.
That's really good advice, actually. Yeah, I think that's it. I used to work in London, and you would go in and you would get used to it. But then since moving out to Hertfordshire, and when I go into London now, I think, oh, how could I actually ever done this there sort of every day, because it's just so overwhelming. How about yourself, Richard? Have you got any tips and tricks in your arsenal when it comes to fatigue?
I mean, I feel like I'm a really bad case study because I don't do what I should do all of the time. Certainly taking a break is good, although I try and sort of reduce fluid intake as much as possible.
That is true.
With that one, espressos rather than long coffees and that sort of thing. But also, I mean, I like doing routes that I know, and when you're doing sort of fairly regular routes, you kind of know what to expect, and you know where the help is, and you know which stations, for instance, have a good help and which ones don't. I mean, I can't pass through St Pancras without being stopped 3 times asking if I need help, and although the lifts are often broken, that's another matter. But yeah, and the train staff that I pass through Paddington quite a lot, and the train staff in the assisted travel section there are brilliant. They're really helpful, and I've never had a problem with them. The problems often come when something unusual happens, and that could be anything from a broken lift to overcrowding, a train cancelled. Even as soon as trains are busy, people's whole mentality shifts. And I've found a number of times that people are very kind of sort of happy to give up their seat, for instance, on a quiet train where there's lots of seats available, or where there's no seats available perhaps, but it's not busy. But the minute it gets packed, it's every man for himself, one woman, and it's a totally different ball game. I don't have any particular advice there, other than to somehow read the future and avoid anything that's going to their role.
I mean, it certainly came up on the questionnaire a lot about people, when we asked what journeys people like to do, it was typically journeys that they're very familiar with. And they would have sort of like points on the journey where they knew they could stop and where they knew they could get help. So that very much echoes what a lot of people have said on the survey.
Meg, have you got any tips on how to deal with fatigue and travel fatigue?
I'd say if you can request assistance in advance, so maybe book passenger assist because they can help with wayfinding in stations, getting you to a seat, or even just carrying your bags and stuff. So I'd say that. I mean, for me personally, if I know the time I'm going to come back to a station, I can set an alarm on my phone or something to remind me to get off the train, which can sometimes be a problem for me. But also just maybe some like live real-time tracking apps. So it's sometimes useful to track the journey and then know how much longer you've got. But I would say mainly just planning breaks, get some support from staff, or maybe if you've got a rail card or something, you can have a companion ticket, take someone with you if it's a possibility. But I know it's not always.